everyone, and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for another St. Louis FC post-match edition, and it's good to be back. I've been out of the country doing a lot of different things. I was doing some broadcasting here in the country. I think I talked about that. I'm not sure if I had a video in between then or not. I was doing several of the United States soccer regionals, the USYS Nationals as well in Dallas, as well as the President's Cup in Tulsa. So I've been kind of in and out, missed a few games here and there, and then I was out of the country, had a wedding to attend in Canada. So there's been a lot that's gone on in the meantime. Obviously the biggest one was Coach Schilly being replaced. Those of you who have followed this space know that I was doing my best not to call for his job, but still calling for his job. And I never got to know the man personally, but from what I saw, he was an upstanding citizen. He was a fine gentleman. It just got to the point to where the team was having too many of the same problems. They weren't being addressed. Now, I'm a strong proponent of the idea that there's only so much that a coach can do, and it differs sport to sport. But when you are having the same problems over and over and over, even if the coach is trying to correct that and it is not happening, if it continues to be a problem, then it does fall on the shoulders of the coach. And I was actually very impressed with the fact that St. Louis FC managed to have the wherewithal to replace the coach, because I honestly thought that, I'm not trying to badmouth the city, but St. Louis FC, I believe, was a little bit short-sighted to go with Schilly in the first place, because St. Louis has this kind of mentality of, oh, well, it's Scott Gallagher, so therefore they're this high-profile club. Well, you go around the country, and yeah, there are a lot of people who are in the know who know who Scott Gallagher is in terms of being a club, but St. Louis is not the hotbed that we once were for soccer. So this whole mentality of, oh, well, we need a team made up entirely of St. Louis players, and we need St. Louis coaches. No, we need the best players, we need the best talent, we need the best coaches, and it's not always going to come from this area. And to always try to look within is a little bit short-sighted, and I was quite frankly glad that St. Louis FC managed to see that, managed to say, hey, we're a year and a half in here, and we're not making the progress that we want to. We're not in good position to make the playoffs, and ultimately they made the right call. Now, as things have gone on, the team has not necessarily had the bounce-back effect that you would normally like to see following a coaching change. They've had a couple disappointing draws. A couple of them where you were fortunate to get the draw, one against Swope Park where they should have had the win, and that's just been kind of the way that it's gone all season for St. Louis FC, and unfortunately it carried over into this game against San Antonio. St. Louis was by far the better team. I mean, I will be blunt about it, and I don't believe that there's any bias in that. San Antonio won because of a couple St. Louis FC mistakes along the back line, some marginally questionable goalkeeping positioning. That I will leave up to you, because as a goalkeeper, I'm always going to side with the goalkeeper. The second one was a bit iffy on Thompson's part, but in his defense, you do have to kind of keep an eye on the fact that that player might come charging in, and you need to be ready to go out and meet him, and all of a sudden a shot comes where a goalkeeper's not expecting it to come from, and then he's caught a little bit in no man's land, although he was inside the 6-yard area. But it was a perfectly placed shot. There were going to be a lot of goalkeepers outside of Thompson that were going to struggle getting to that one. But there were a lot of defensive miscues as well. That being said, the San Antonio goalkeeper basically won the day for them. I mean, he stopped a penalty kick shot. He stopped some point-blank range shots. I kept telling my wife that St. Louis FC needed to shoot to his right, because even though he was kicking with his right foot, all of his top-notch saves were over to his left-hand side. So maybe they needed to try the other hand and see whether or not he could have been as quick to that, because, I mean, the guy had reflexes like you wouldn't believe. He might as well have been a hockey goalkeeper, the way that he was just reacting to some of those shots, because that's what they were, is reaction saves. They weren't necessarily saves where he was in fantastic position and just managed to get down. I mean, they were quality reaction saves, and that's a big reason why San Antonio won. And they had a little bit of the story on St. Louis. They knew where to take advantage of the chances they were going to get. They knew that they were playing against a goalkeeper who wasn't necessarily the tallest, wasn't necessarily the most fleet of foot, so if they could get it up and over him, they were going to have a good chance to score. They had other opportunities, a couple off the that ended up being saves and off the crossbar and what have you. But from the St. Louis point of view, it was really one of those scenarios where they should have come away with 3 points. They outplayed San Antonio. They outchanced them. I don't know what the final stats were on the game, but I know in halftime they were playing it up in the beer garden, and St. Louis FC had a shot margin. They had 6 shots. It was either 6 or 7 shots, and there were only 3 shots for San Antonio. Well, they had 2 first-half goals. St. Louis FC had 6 corner kicks. There was only 1 for San Antonio. So that gives you a little bit of an indication how the game was going for St. Louis FC, but for whatever reason, once they didn't get that goal, and I was immediately impressed by St. Louis FC coming out and playing hard and getting things on the front foot and going after something, because they had talked about that during the pregame show with Coach Leonard, was he was asking his team, when was the last time we scored a goal in the first 15 minutes, and nobody could answer. Well, I can tell you that none of the fans probably know either, because it hasn't happened in such a long time. Well, they almost did that, scoring in the first 10 minutes, and then it was called back by a questionable push. As an official, I understand what the officials saw, because it had to have been on that initial head ball that came back across the goal before the goal was scored. There was no other push available to be called. But I understand where that comes from. The thing that upset me about that call later on is St. Louis FC should have been awarded a penalty kick in the first half, because the defender did the exact same thing with more force and got away with it. So it was one of those scenarios where the official did not cost St. Louis FC the game, but they did not help either, especially in those scenarios where they took a goal away that could easily have been let go, and they did not award St. Louis FC a penalty kick that was exactly the same kind of foul and more egregious at that. St. Louis FC right now, I think we're to the point where, once again, like last year, we just need to enjoy these last few weeks for what they are. Try to see some improvement. Hopefully we'll see a bit more offense, a little bit better defense, more consistent goalkeeping across the board, because nothing is officially over, but St. Louis FC is all but out of the playoff race now. They have too many teams in front of them. They're not too far behind on points. That could be made up, but there are so many teams in front of them now. They're currently 12th in the West, and with that many teams to climb over to try to make it into the postseason, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be in the cards. There's still a few weeks before the off-season, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do in the off-season as to whether or not Coach Leonard is retained, whether or not they look outside. It's all open right now for St. Louis FC. You have to look in all areas, because other than Hervin Herrera, there really isn't a position on this team that could not potentially be improved. That's not to say that everybody on the team needs to be replaced. This team has talent. They just need to be focused in a certain aspect, in a certain one unified direction. And then they'll be able to get some stuff done, because there are teams that have come in that have been formed after St. Louis FC that are having more success, and I think that's what upsets fans, because last year you kind of got over the hump. You kind of just said, okay, well, they're a first-year team. They got things started a little bit late. Second year, hopes were high. The team was doing well out of the gates, putting themselves in a consistent position to make the playoffs. They've fallen off the rails here late. Next year, there has to be significant progress. It doesn't matter whether you bring in new coaches, whether you bring in new players. There has to be significant progress. Otherwise, this team may just end up languishing the way that they are here the last couple of seasons. But Still a few weeks left, still soccer to enjoy. Show up at the park. I was impressed with the teams, or excuse me, the fans that did show up against San Antonio, because I was a little bit worried with the threat of rain, the rain that had rolled through the area beforehand as well. There were some slow people getting into the stadium. I think they lingered out in the parking lot a little bit too long. But ultimately there was a capacity crowd in there. And that was always good to see, and it's good to see St. Louis still supporting the game, even though the team hasn't necessarily produced on the field the way that we would like. That will do it. What did you think of that game against San Antonio? What do you think of St. Louis's postseason chances? Are they completely done? Is there any kind of hope out there? Let us know in the comment section. Comment, rate, and subscribe. But until the next time, I'll see you then.